All right, so let's talk about some low value texting mistakes that you're probably making, because in today's dating scene, most of your success or lack of success is determined by what happens through your messaging. So it's critical to get this part of your game down if you want to generate options with women consistently and stand out from the average guy. And the third point in this video is one of the most crucial to understand and internalize, so be sure to stick around for that and the points that come before it, because they will build on each other to help you create a texting framework that will decrease the amount of ghosting and flakiness that you experience and prevent you from making some of the most common mistakes that I see as a coach that position you as an unattractive, low value guy. So the first one is a big problem I see all the time when reviewing guys' text conversations. It happens to even the smartest of men, and it was something that I used to do as well when I was younger, but it can definitely be solved with a bit of conscious thought and repetition rather than just mindlessly going through the texting process and hoping things pan out as you go along. The latter strategy of just hoping it works out is something that can work, but it's going to lead to a lot of inefficiencies and losing interactions and dates that would have panned out if you simply had a more calculated approach to the messaging process. And the advantage of having a calculated approach to your messaging is that it will actually save you time and energy, because it allows you to create a system for yourself that generates predictable results time and time again. And when you have systems in place, it drastically increases your confidence because you know what moves to make as long as you get to that stage of the interaction with the woman. So for example, if you have a good grasp of what messaging style works for you and you have created a system for yourself that has you landing dates more often than not, you'll feel confident that once you get a girl's number, you can carry it the rest of the way. You just need to get her number and you've got it from there. And this goes for every other phase of the dating process too. If you're great at running a date and escalating, for example, then it's simply about getting her to the date. So what you would do then is sharpen your front end strategy with dating apps or approaching, so on and so forth, and your messaging to create a more efficient funnel that gets the girl to the date where you feel strongest. But you want to bring up all of these areas over time, and that's what creates confidence across the board. Now, with that said, the reason I explained all of that is to lay the foundation here for driving home my point that projecting how the conversation will likely go is really important for improving your texting. Because the mistake that many guys make is that they'll open the girl with something and then they don't know how to follow up when she replies. Or they'll get a little bit past the opener and get stuck in the middle of the conversation, not knowing how to progress things toward meeting up with the woman. This can lead to a lot of low value behavior that turns the girl off, because you might feel pressure in your mind like you need to really send the perfect response, and if you don't, it's gonna blow the whole thing apart. But at the same time, you aren't sure what to say because you didn't think that far ahead. So that in itself is the solution. You need to start thinking about what the girl is likely to respond with after the initial opener or the next message that you're gonna send. Ask yourself, what are the likely outcomes here based on what I'm about to say? And what might you say next? And what would make sense as a follow-up once she responds? Instead of treating the messaging process as this random occurrence that is happening to you in real time, become consciously aware of what you're saying and what will likely come next. And if you don't know, then don't say it. This is also the problem with using random openers or lines or messages that you find online. Typically, the person who came up with that opener or that message has a certain style to where they know exactly how to follow up after sending that message. But what a lot of guys will do is use those same lines and then get stuck because they didn't think ahead of what they would say next or what the girl might say next. They were simply too focused on getting a reply in the first place. They get excited when they do get one, and then they're lost. Projecting ahead will help prevent situations where you send a message and then you cringe asking yourself later why you sent that in the first place, because that is the worst feeling. And once you ring a bell, you can't unring it. So instead, take a second in your mind to map out the potential directions the conversation is going to go and what you might say next in response to her. It's very similar to chess, and the hallmark of a good chess player is someone who makes his move while thinking multiple moves ahead and potential reactions to his moves. He isn't just moving pieces randomly and crossing his fingers hoping that he wins. So be more calculated with everything that you do, and it will actually free up mental bandwidth and allow you to become more relaxed and creative while avoiding presenting yourself in a low value and unattractive way. Now, with this second one, I want to build on the first point because they're so closely related, and this also leads to a lot of low value behavior in text that just makes you look goofy, and it can kill an interaction that had potential otherwise. And this one is something that a lot of the nice guy types are guilty of. It's extremely common, and it's usually the guys that are genuinely intelligent and friendly in conversation, but they lose sight of the bigger picture of what's going on and how they're coming across, which then leads to accidentally turning girls off left and right and wondering why they're getting ghosted. So the mistake I'm referencing is not giving the conversation direction and not having a plan of where you are ultimately guiding the interaction. Again, this is closely related to the first point about future projection, but the first point was more about thinking a couple steps ahead in terms of each message, whereas this point is about having the bigger picture in mind overall. And when you're messaging a girl, ask yourself, where am I trying to take this exactly? What exactly is my plan here? And don't lose sight of that. Because what happens to many guys is they'll end up in a conversation that lacks structure and it lacks having a nice flow to it. So things begin to carry on and on and on, and they go off a cliff into what I call platonic hell. Platonic hell is this zone to where you're basically pen pals going back and forth in this cordial conversation where the girl is receptive and conversing back with you, but the energy is just going down slowly over time until she eventually ghosts you and things fizzle out. Another reason I call it platonic hell is because guys who engage in this type of conversational flow will usually just keep things very surface level and platonic, so there's never any intent shown, and it just turns into this long-winded exchange about the girl's hobbies and how your day is going and so on and so forth. There's essentially no direction to the conversation, and the man isn't setting the frame of where things are headed, so by default it goes off a cliff because women aren't going to do it for you. At least most of the time they won't. Some girls will get fed up with your platonic nice guy ramblings and push things toward meeting up, but that's more of a rarity rather than something that you can rely on. Another issue with not giving things direction and ending up in this pen pal mode is that the type of guy who does this will almost always say things that put him in more of a low value position along the way, or give off more of a feminine vibe due to his willingness to keep yapping on and his lack of assertiveness. So just understand that a lack of direction and future projection can lead to a lot of unnecessary rambling that positions you as an unattractive, weak guy that snuffs out any attraction that may have been there. Now for the next one, this is critical to internalize because it goes hand in hand with the last two, and if there's one mistake I see more than any other, it is this one, and it is one of the fastest ways to position yourself as a low value guy when messaging a girl. And if you've ever had a situation where things seem to start pretty good, but then they mysteriously went off a cliff and you couldn't figure out why, there's a good chance that you violated this principle that I'm about to share. And that is the idea that you want to let the girl set the level of enthusiasm in the text conversation, not you. Now, what many guys will do is exceed the woman's level of enthusiasm, and they're coming in operating higher than her energy level in terms of expression and how much they're investing in the conversation, which then leads to a dynamic where you're clearly more into it than she is, and the likelihood of her falling off and losing attraction increases exponentially. So if you're the type of guy that is using exclamation points all the time and emojis, and you have more of this, yeah, let's do it type of energy in your texting, you're gonna blow a lot of interactions that would have gone well if you hadn't exceeded her level of enthusiasm. I cannot tell you guys how many conversations I review where the girl is more low-key in the conversation, but then the guy is hitting her with exclamation points and smiley faces and tons of questions and long messages, or even if he's more low-key himself, he's doing little things to indicate that he's in more of a hurry to get to the date than she is, and then she ends up vanishing and the dude is lost as to why. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of little details in your messages that add up and sub-communicate a certain vibe even through text. And if those details are off, the vibe you communicate will be one that is low value. And remember that eagerness is one of the fastest ways to kill attraction with a woman. And anytime you come across more eager than she is, you're putting yourself in a low value position and setting yourself up for problems. Now, this doesn't mean that you take it to the extreme either and talk like a robot or not lead the conversation anywhere. The burden of guiding the conversation somewhere is still on you, and no one wants to talk to some brain dead dude who can barely form a sentence, so be sure to calibrate accordingly. The idea is to simply not project a vibe of being eager and exceeding her level of enthusiasm, because it gives off an impression like you probably don't do this very often, and you're just excited to even have the opportunity to talk to this girl. There's also this effect that when you're projecting eagerness, it can passively make the girl start to become less interested because you're just so easily had. You barely even know her, and you're just so excited to have this opportunity to get to know her, and you're wordy and super expressive, and all these details just add up and come across as eager. And these traits in exceeding her enthusiasm has a very high chance of positioning you as a low value guy and giving off the vibe of a low value guy that probably doesn't deal with women very often, so be sure to keep it in check. Now, if you're serious about leveling up your texting and overall communication with women, and you want to get consistent feedback on your conversations, generate more options, and land dates consistently so that you can have your ideal dating life, then be sure to fill out a quick application for the coaching program linked in the description below. and you'll be able to work with me directly and utilize my systems to fast track and streamline all of this. So be sure to check it out, and I will see you in the next one.